Is it a bad fuel pump versus a clogged fuel filter? How to tell the difference before you waste money. Most drivers freak out when their car suddenly struggles to start, loses power while driving, or stalls out at the worst possible moment. Most will think it's because of a fuel pump issue and assume the worst, thinking it's going to cost a fortune. But for a fact, those same symptoms could just as easily be caused by something way cheaper to fix, like a clogged fuel filter. Replacing a fuel pump can cost hundreds of dollars, sometimes even over $1,000. But replacing a fuel filter? That's usually under $50. The real problem is knowing which one is actually failing. So today, I am going to break it down for you in an easy-to-follow way in this video on the signs and symptoms of a bad fuel pump versus a bad or clogged fuel filter. By the end, you'll know exactly how to tell the difference before you waste money. Both the fuel pump and the fuel filter are crucial for your car's performance. They work together to ensure the engine gets a steady, clean supply of fuel. The fuel pump's job is to pull gasoline from the tank and send it under pressure to the engine. The fuel filter's job is to catch dirt, rust, and debris before that fuel reaches the injectors. When either one starts to fail, the symptoms overlap. Hard starts, stalling, hesitation, and poor performance. That's why so many car owners spend big money replacing a fuel pump when the actual issue was a clogged filter, or vice versa. The key is knowing how to spot the subtle differences. Let's walk through it step by step. How a fuel pump fails. The fuel pump is like the heart of your fuel system. It's an electric motor inside your tank that pushes fuel to the engine under the correct pressure. Like any motor, it wears out over time due to heat, age, or contaminated fuel. When it starts failing, here's what you'll notice. Hard starts or no start at all. A weak pump struggles to build the pressure your engine needs. That's why sometimes you'll crank the key for 5 to 10 seconds before the car finally sputters to life. In worst cases, no matter how many times you try, the car won't start because the pump simply isn't sending fuel forward. Whining noise from the tank. Healthy pumps are nearly silent. You shouldn't really notice them. But when they're on their way out, they often make a high-pitched whining or buzzing noise from the back of the car. This sound is the pump's motor straining as it tries to keep up. If you hear it consistently, it's a big red flag. Loss of power at high-speed engines demand more fuel when you accelerate, drive uphill, or cruise at highway speeds. A weak pump can't supply enough, so the car feels like it's running out of gas even with a full tank. The harder you push the car, the worse the problem becomes. Sudden stalling. Sometimes the pump overheats or randomly fails, cutting off fuel altogether. The engine shuts down while you're driving, leaving you stranded. After the pump cools, it may work again for a short while, but these random recoveries are only temporary. Low fuel pressure reading. A diagnostic fuel pressure test makes things clearer. If your pump is failing, the gauge will show consistently low pressure no matter the situation, whether idling, revving, or accelerating. That's a strong confirmation it's the pump, not the filter. Bottom line, a failing fuel pump causes constant worsening issues. It doesn't really get better after a restart. Once the pump starts going bad, the symptoms become more frequent until the car won't run at all. How a fuel filter clogs. The fuel filter is more like a security guard. Its only job is to stop dirt, rust, and debris from entering your fuel injectors. Over time, it collects so much junk that fuel has trouble flowing through. That's when symptoms appear, often feeling similar to a pump issue. Engine hesitation. You hit the gas expecting smooth acceleration, but instead the engine hesitates or stumbles. That hesitation happens because the restricted filter can't deliver fuel fast enough for the sudden demand. Loss of power, under load. At idle or light driving, the car might run just fine. But the moment you try to accelerate hard, climb a hill, or tow a load, the filter can't keep up. The car bogs down, making it feel weak or sluggish. Random stalling, but restarts easily. A clogged filter can temporarily starve the engine, causing it to stall. But here's the difference. After sitting a short while, enough fuel seeps through the restriction, and the car usually restarts without much trouble. This is a classic sign of a clogged filter, not a bad pump. Fuel pressure drops. At high demand, hook up a fuel pressure gauge, and you'll often see normal pressure at idle because the demand is low. But as soon as you rev or accelerate, the pressure drops sharply. The filter simply can't keep up. Older car or neglected maintenance. Unlike pumps, filters are regular maintenance items. If it's been tens of thousands of miles, or you can't even remember the last time it was replaced, clogging becomes a very likely culprit. Bottom line, a clogged filter usually causes intermittent or load-specific problems. The car may run fine at times and struggle under stress, but it's less likely to leave you completely stranded compared to a failed pump. Key differences: fuel pump versus fuel filter. Here's how to separate the two without wasting money. A high-pitched whining or buzzing noise coming from the fuel tank is a classic sign of a failing fuel pump. Filters don't make noise when they're clogged, so if you hear this sound, the pump is the prime suspect. Restart behavior. Pay attention to how your car behaves after stalling. If it restarts fairly quickly and runs again for a short time, that usually suggests the filter is clogged and restricting flow. On the other hand, if it refuses to restart at all, that points strongly toward the pump failing to deliver fuel. Pressure test. Hooking up a fuel pressure gauge gives you a clear reading. A weak or failing pump shows low pressure constantly. A clogged filter, however, will often allow normal pressure at idle, but starve the engine when demand increases, such as when accelerating or climbing a hill. Age and maintenance. Think about your maintenance history. If the fuel filter hasn't been replaced in years, it's often the cheaper and more likely culprit. Pumps generally last much longer, but once they fail, replacement is unavoidable. How to test at home. You don't always need to run to a mechanic. With a few simple checks, you can narrow down the problem right in your driveway. Fuel. Pressure gauge test. Attach a pressure gauge to your car's fuel rail. If the reading stays consistently low, that points to a failing fuel pump. On the other hand, if pressure looks fine at idle but drops significantly when you rev or accelerate, that almost always signals a clogged filter restricting flow. For pump noise, turn the ignition to the on position, without starting the engine, and place your ear near the fuel tank. A healthy pump will give a soft humming sound. If you hear nothing at all or an unusually loud whining noise, the pump is likely failing. Check maintenance records. Filters are meant to be replaced regularly, but most drivers forget. If you can't remember the last time yours was changed, replace it first. It's inexpensive, easy, and surprisingly often the root cause of the issue. Cost difference. Here's where getting the diagnosis right really matters. Fuel pump replacement. Depending on the make and model, replacing a pump can set you back anywhere from $400 to $200, especially if it's located inside the tank and requires extra labor. Fuel filter replacement. By comparison, a new fuel filter usually costs just $20 to $50. Even with labor, it's a fraction of the pump's price. That's why it's so important not to jump straight to replacing the pump. Spending close to $1,000 when all your car needed was a simple $30 filter change is not just frustrating, it's money wasted. So here's the takeaway. A failing fuel pump and a clogged fuel filter can feel almost identical, but they're not the same problem. A bad pump gives you constant low pressure, noisy operation, and hard or no starts. A clogged filter causes hesitation, stalls under heavy load, and pressure drops only when the engine is working hard. If you love this breakdown, then make sure to like this, drop a comment, and also check this other video, where we showed you how to differentiate between a torque converter problem and transmission issues to save cash.